Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Two-Way tonight, what I like to call a very special episode. 3 parts tonight. I'll tell you briefly what's going on in the news. Then we're going to have a conversation about a great new book out today, Who Believed in You, by the McCormicks, Powell McCormick, Senator David McCormick. Going to talk to them and some of the folks in their orbit featured in the book about the power of mentorship, and eager to have your questions on that. And then we're going to go a little overtime today. And then at 7 Eastern time, we're going to have a conversation about Two-Way and about the prospect of members of the community getting to ask questions at the White House briefing, which occurred today. And we'll show you that. So if you can stick around after 7, eager to hear from you all about your thoughts about the Two-Way community being represented in the White House briefing room. So we'll get to the book in just a moment. But very briefly, let me tell you what is going on today, or what is going on. Special elections in Florida and Wisconsin, talking to folks in Florida and both parties today. The 2 special House races are, as we discussed this morning on the morning meeting, expected to go to the Republicans. The margins will be scrutinized, but my sense is they will not be so small in either race that Republicans will have much to worry about. The Wisconsin Supreme Court race, don't ask me for the exit polls. There are none. And I don't know anything about what's going on in that race, except that both sides think it will be close. On tariffs, President Trump, today, I met with his tariff team. Lots of conversations about what he's decided. Still not a huge amount of clarity, even amongst those most closely watching on Wall Street and in corporate America and in the media. I can't tell you very much more about what might be in there, except that there is a lot of tension and a lot of questions about what's going to happen. The president says he settled on the plan at the White House briefing today. His press secretary didn't say much, except that the tariffs would go into effect immediately, as the president has long forecast. And in response to my question at the briefing today, she said the president was willing to take calls still, both before tomorrow's afternoon event and after, from world leaders or business leaders who wanted to try to make a deal about where the tariffs would head. Still questions around the Maryland man, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, and his deportation. The media continues to report that this was someone who should not have been deported and sent to a prison. The administration, including a tweet from the vice president, very forceful in saying that it was absolutely right to send him away. There's going to have to be more reporting there. More DOGE layoffs today at various departments. And the Washington Post reporting that the National Security Advisor and other security officials in the administration have at times used Gmail for official business, including, some sources say to the Washington Post, business that probably should not have been conducted there. Finally, in the White House briefing room today, they have a new media seat that the press office allows to be occupied by different people in new media, as contrasted from the legacy folks who populate much of the briefing room, including the front row. I was honored to be able to sit in that seat today and ask a few questions and to read a question from one of your colleagues here in our community, Kate from Wisconsin, and we'll talk about that in the 7 o'clock hour. But here is what the White House press secretary said in introducing Two-Way for the first time in the briefing room. Number 1, please.
Our new media seat today is Mark Halperin, the co-founder and editor-in-chief of Two-Way, a new live video platform that builds communities around interactive conversations with leaders and content creators from every subject area. They have over 37.5 million video views, over 3.6 million watch time hours since the platform began just last year. This is new media in its truest sense, allowing the people to ask questions, make comments, and be an active part of engagement on the most important issues facing the country and our world.
So as I said, I got to ask some questions, but I was honored to ask a question on behalf of Kate from Wisconsin. And you'll see later in the program at 7, after we talk about the book, you'll see Katie's question, and we'll talk more about the future of Two-Way in the briefing room and elsewhere. So looking forward to that. But now let's go to the conversation about this book. And we'll bring in the 2 co-authors, 2 folks who I know, Dina Powell, who's here, Dina Powell McCormick, and her husband, Dave McCormick, who also happens to be a senator from Pennsylvania. And they're co-authors of the new book out today. I'm asking both to unmute, called Who Believed in You? How Purposeful Mentorship Changes the World. Welcome to you both. Congratulations on the book. You've done lots together, but this is your first co-authorship, I believe. So congratulations on not only doing that, but surviving that.
Yeah.
I like to ask all authors two questions, and they're particularly appropriate in this case. So we'll start with Dina, not alphabetical or by elected office, but Dina anyway. Dina, tell us the origin story of how you two, when and how you two decided to write the book.
Sure. Well, thanks so much, Mark, for having us on. Congratulations on getting a seat in the White House today. I have been a religious two-way follower, as you know, from day one, and it is just remarkable what you have built in just such a short period of time. So it's awesome to be with you tonight.
Thank you for that, and thank you both for joining for this. Go ahead.
So Dave and I, okay, I'll tell you in full disclosure, this was his idea. And it really stemmed from having our six daughters during COVID. We spent obviously so much time with them, and we realized that there was so much that was lost from that generation that went way beyond missing high school proms or high school graduations. It was meaningful human connectivity in kind of a 2 and 3 year seminal period for that age group. Think about the first boss we all had, the high school coach, the college professor. And we realized that we wanted to make them realize how important it was. And so we started telling them the stories of people that believed in us. We wouldn't be where we are today without. And then we started asking lots of our friends. And we're privileged to know a lot of extraordinary leaders in the country. We asked Satya Nadella, Tory Burch, David Chang, the chef, Governors Huckabee, and more. The simple question, who believed in you? And to a person, they said, we wouldn't be where we are today without some people having a lot of faith in us and seeing something in ourselves that we didn't see. So Dave and I are hoping that we can start a mentoring movement, believing that every American can invest in one person and have a huge impact in the country.
All right, excellent. David, or Senator, whichever you prefer I call you. Tell the other question I ask authors, who is this book for? Who should buy this book?
Well, it's certainly a book, as Dina said, that young people, as they're thinking about charting their career and their life, finding a life of purpose, would hopefully benefit from. But honestly, we think it's for everybody, because what happens today, and your show, your two-way here is emblematic of this. There's so much going on. It's a bit overwhelming, and there's a lot of people losing hope and caught up in the times and asking themselves, what can they do to make a difference? And what we discovered is that you can change the world kind of one person at a time by helping someone find their purpose. And so the book, although we interviewed a lot of famous people, they're wildly successful, the book is not about the famous people. The book is about the people you've never heard of that help them find their purpose and make such a huge impact on the world. So the lesson is we can all make a big difference. And this is an opportunity to sort of reflect and figure out how to pay it forward.
One of the most impressive things about the two of you, both of whom have had very impressive careers, is how big your networks are. You both know so many people, and many of them are on here, and we're going to get to all of them in a moment to bring them in and hear their stories. And some of them you've heard of, and some of them you haven't, but they're all super important to this through line of mentorship. But I want to ask you both a couple more questions. Just David, you first. Who's someone who you were a mentee of, and just tell the story of how important that was to you.
Yeah, when Dean and I were thinking about this, my life changed because of a football coach in high school, and I was kind of riding the bench my sophomore year in high school, and the coach got fired and a new coach got hired, and over the summer he looked at all the films from the previous games, and he'd see this guy would come in the third or fourth quarter if we were losing big or winning big, and he called me and got together over the summer. He said, "Listen, you've got promise. I'm going to give you an opportunity." And so I really worked hard. And at the end of the football camp, going into the school year, he made me the co-captain as a junior. Seems like a small thing now, but it actually changed my life. He saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. I went on to become an all-state football player. It helped me get into West Point. And this guy literally changed the course of my life. And we found that same story repeated over and over again, whether it's a corporate titan or whether it's a significant political figure. There was always a couple people along the way, sometimes one, sometimes multiple, that changed the course of someone's life because they invested and became a true mentor to them.
Dina, what's the key to being a good mentee?
Being a good mentee. We actually write about that in whobelievedyou.com. And I do want to say we're really excited. The proceeds of the book are going to veterans and mentoring organizations that we've identified. Mentoring, of course, in the military is a very, very, very big piece of it. And I know Dave talks a lot about that. Being a good mentee really requires having a few elements. Trust is at the top. You really have to be vulnerable with somebody. You have to have a trusting relationship. You have to be able to take feedback. To be honest, in the book, we talk about what men and women need as mentees and mentors. We did a study at the Yale School of Management. We interviewed 2,200 people with Morning Consult and Yale. And what was so fascinating, Mark, is that people benefit greatly from mentors, but women and men want different things. Men want access to power and influence. Women want someone who will be honest with them and authentic and stick with them over their career and their life. And what we realized is that there's something called transactional mentoring, which everybody needs, right? Like getting a job, having a recommendation. But we want to ignite something called transformational mentoring where you really are dedicated to that person and you help them in all aspects of their life, not just career. And I'll end by saying something really important. And this is one of my mentors, maybe I'll share with you, that taught me this, is that you have to also be efficient with the mentor's time. It's something we really are trying to teach our daughters. Like, don't show up and be like, how do I become Mark Halperin? Like, where do you start with that, right? But rather, here are the 3 things I really would love for you to help me think about in my personal and professional life. If I promise to be efficient with your time, will you dedicate it to me? And for instance, if I need you to recommend me to something, I'll write the letter, I'll put the email in the link and make it as easy as possible. Because definitionally, the people that this generation want as mentors are pretty busy. In my case, as you know, because I've known you for so long, but neither of us age, of course, Mark. But as you know, I'm an immigrant to the country from Cairo, Egypt, a small Coptic Christian community. My family immigrated to Dallas when I was 5 years old, didn't speak any English. I learned English quick. Texan took me a lot longer. But when I was a student at the University of Texas waitressing to pay for college, I met Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison. And I'd never even seen a senior woman, in Texas in a government or political role. And she said, come to DC, defer law school and come to DC. And Mark, I was so scared because my parents basically said to me growing up, we left our homeland so you and your sisters could pursue your dreams as long as you're a lawyer, a doctor, or an engineer. And I had gotten into law school and I was supposed to be heading there when she said, you know what, Dina, if you don't take a risk on yourself, no one will take a risk on you. And so that obviously changed the course of my life. It led me to serving in 2 White Houses and 16 years at Goldman Sachs, building some of the most effective, I hope, mentoring programs in the world. And that one person really changed my life.
And Dina has worked on one of the most important mentoring programs, I think, in the history of the world, literally, regarding women in small business. We'll talk about that. Again, we're talking about the book, Who Believed in You? There's a link in the chat to buy the book. It's a great read. The stories are really compelling. The characters are compelling. That's what makes a good book. But also, if you want to be a better mentor or a better mentee, and I think there's not too many people who don't fit in one or both categories, you should buy the book. So go on the link now. You can buy it anywhere you buy books, but there's a link in the chat. All right, I'm going to start bringing in folks. Lots of great folks joined and just hear their stories, and you guys can ask them questions too, as much as you wish. And I know Senator has to go before too long, so we're going to get at least some questions for him. But first, we'll bring in someone who you all do know, Congresswoman Debbie Dingell from Michigan. Welcome in, Congressman. Thank you for joining. Tell folks your connection both to Dave and Dina and to the book and to mentoring.
Well, Mark, it's always good to be with you. And
thank you for joining. Good to see you.
Talking about something that doesn't get me in trouble for a change. Although I always tell the truth. I've known both of them for a very long time. Dina and I go way back because of her background. And I lived in Michigan and lived in Dearborn and have spent a lot of time with the Arab American community. So we went way back. And when I made a decision to leave General Motors, which most people forget now that I worked there for 3 decades, I was I didn't know what to do. Well, I didn't know what to do, but she was someone I could really bounce things off and had ideas. And she actually got me involved in a program that was something that I loved all the way around, mentoring young people and helping them be successful. And I remember when she met David. I remember when they were dating. I remember when they got married. And we have stayed friends through many tough elections and times, because we are people that respect each other, can disagree with each other, though I never disagree with Dina.
Obvious. Wait,
and
Congresswoman, I don't want to interrupt you, but this is something we learn in the book, that women don't take credit enough. She was the chairwoman of 10,000 small businesses in Michigan, which ended up being the most successful of all of our cities, Detroit. And we have hundreds of graduates of small business owners in Detroit at a very tough period of time, who created hundreds of jobs in that city because of her leadership. She got all of the partners that we needed on the ground. It made such a huge difference. In fact, we had Carla joining us, one of the first business owners, Debbie, but she unfortunately has bad Wi-Fi where she is, so I don't know if she's going to make it. But I really want to say, Debbie, thank you for what you have done and how you honestly embody the spirit of two-way. And I think that's what we hope this book does too, Mark, that this is about people, not politics, and respectfully listening to each other and each person trying to make a difference. And Congresswoman Dingell has always made a difference her entire life.
Yeah, I mean, through the program you did together, through 10,000 Women, but also just through all your work, I think it's fair to say that, Congressman, you've mentored an entire city and community. So just tell us your one or two thoughts about being a good mentor and what it takes to do that well.
Well, 10,000, the 10,000 small businesses really meant a lot for me. And I hope Carla can get on, because she was a young African-American woman who has really become one of the most successful business owners in Michigan. And I remember when she was first starting out, what was, wanted advice, was very, introducing her to other people that would help her. But look, I was mentored. You want to know, people would look at me and never suspect this, but the person that helped me the most in my career was president of the UAW. And when there was a presidential campaign going on, I'm not going to tell you how long ago it was, and they wanted to know who they could deal with. Steve Yokich, who was president then, said you can deal with the UAW through Debbie Dingell. And that was the most empowering thing that anybody did for me in politics, because those of us who are women know that a long time ago people didn't. But you talk to people, you listen to people, you give them candid advice. But you try to also be supportive. And I think that's one of the most helpful things you can do, and to help people network, to go through the obstacles, not get down when you face them, but go through them.
All right, we're going to ask Eric Motley to unmute. We're hoping Carla Walker-Miller can join us, but we'll bring Eric in after he unmutes. And raise your hand if you want to get a question. We're going to take some questions after we talk to Eric a little bit, because I want to make sure there's time for the senator to take some questions before he goes. Eric, welcome in, the Deputy Director of the National Gallery of Art. Eric, tell us about your connection to the McCormicks and to mentoring.
Well, I worked with Dina at the White House, and then she became my boss, and she still is my boss. And David McCormick became a very good friend of mine at the Aspen Institute in a fellowship program. And they both, the wonderful idea that men are like diamonds, they polish one another. Well, Dina and David have been people in my lives for the last 20 years who've had a tremendous influence on my growth and have been mentors in many ways that I've discovered.
Excellent.
And he married us, Mark. He married us. He was the officiant at
that's
our
a
wedding.
pretty important role. Senator, I'll turn it to you to ask a question or to foster a conversation with either or both Eric and Debbie.
Well, thank you. I know both of them so well and admire them both. Eric has a wonderful story that I'd ask him to tell about his mentor, someone that truly changed his life, a community that changed his life. But Aunt Shine really was something else. If you might describe that, Eric, I just love the story.
Thank you, David. I grew up in a very small rural African-American community in Montgomery, Alabama. And I was considered one of the smartest kids in the town until I went to first grade. And the teacher informed my grandparents that I was not as brilliant as they had thought. And And my grandmother reached out to the one woman in the town that she thought could help me. And she was a retired teacher, having already retired like 40 years. And she came over to the house and she realized that I did have a reading deficiency. And she tucked me under her arms. And her name was Emma Madison Bell, but we called her Aunt Shine because everywhere she went, light followed. And she was a muscular person, both in physique and in faith. And she decided that she would take me on. And she required me to read the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution every day out loud until I could commit to memory the preamble to both documents. She felt that it was so important that as an American citizen in this rural community, that I realized the importance of my citizenship and the opportunities that I had been given. And she taught me two great lessons: that education was truly a liberating force, but also my understanding the laws and the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence would equip me well throughout my life. And for 2 years, she tutored me at my dining room table until I was restored back to the top of my class. But in the process, she also gave me a sense of civic responsibility, that to whom much is given, much is required. And the only commitment that I made to her was that I would commit myself to helping others who were in need. You'll never find her name in print. You've never heard of her. She's one of those unknown forces of nature that in a very quiet way found the opportunity to take me under her wings and show me the way. And my life has just been inundated with people like Aunt Shine. And there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about her influence and the impact that she had on my life.
Eric, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to bring folks in from the community again. If you want to get in the conversation, raise your hand. Again, the senator can't spend the full hour with us, so we'll feel free to ask him questions, and he'll chime in a little bit. But everybody, stay with us. There's more people coming. But let's start with Patty. Welcome in. Unmute. Tell folks who don't know where you are, and a question for all the group and about the book. Who believed in you, Patty?
Yes, thank you, everyone. This is really an honor to be with all of you. I have just a story about a mentor that I had when I was 25 years old. I was living in California. This is crazy. Motel 6 had just become a public company. They were sold by the original owners, and I was living in California. Had gone to work for them because they had opened an office in Century City. My boss, I want to say his name because I have no idea where he is, Bruce Stewart, was the marketing VP, and I was the secretary. And what he did was he would write proposals, but he wouldn't just have me type them. He would say, here's what I'm doing. This is why I'm doing it. This is why I'm saying this. It was very, very simple, but he was building confidence in me so that I could have the ability to look at what I was doing differently, but also he gave me confidence to feel like I could do it. Long story short, through a series of events, he was promoted and transferred. I put in a proposal as to why they needed a PR manager, and unbelievably, I was made PR manager, told that I would take his office because he had been transferred out, and to hire a secretary myself. And I was 25 years old, and it made all the difference.
Great story, Patty. Incredible.
But I would say the one question I would have, and I'll try to be quick, is other than kind of instructing someone that way, what are other tips? Because I'm at the stage in my life where I just absolutely love and would love to do more of mentoring. What are some things other than just kind of being a person telling somebody what to do? Sorry.
Yeah. Senator.
Patty, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Either McCormick can answer.
Well, first of all, that's amazing, Patty. And I'm so glad you said his name, because in the book, so many of the people say, I wish I'd said thank you. Christine Lagarde is in the book, and she says, the woman that changed my life passed away, and I never got to say thank you. So we kind of have been saying, answer 3 questions. Who believed in you? Have you thanked them? And who can you believe in to change the world? And I just want to say, for women, one very specific thing is tough love, getting feedback, especially in male-dominated, industries, if you will, that Debbie and I, and it sounds like you, Patty, have worked in. having male mentors is really critical because they see a perspective we don't see. And
Exactly.
I'll just tell you, one of mine was Lloyd Blankfein. He was the CEO of Goldman Sachs. Debbie knows him. And he used to say, when I thank him for being a mentor, he'd say, or you could say tormentor. But what he meant was he actually gave me tough love. And, you got to get thicker skin, Dina. Stop looking back. Men don't look back, look forward. So honestly, being that direct and honest and vulnerable with people, telling your story that way and sharing it, I think makes a big difference. It's not just the encouragement. You don't grow from failure. Excuse me, you don't grow from success, you grow from failure. And
Yes.
helping people through that is critical.
Amazing. Senator.
Yeah, I just would add to what Dina said. We found across all these incredible stories, and there's as Dina said, it's political figures and David Chang, the famous chef, and Brian Grazer, the Hollywood producer. There's a common theme. One is you got to have relationships based on trust. You gotta be vulnerable and trustworthy on both sides. Second, you got to have common values. It's not about just trying to help somebody get the promotion. It's about helping them live the life of purpose that they're seeking, and values is critical. Third's commitment. You don't have to be with them for 3-hour lunches every 2 weeks, but you have to be with them at the moment they need it. And that's really critical because, the opportunity is not lined up with somebody's schedule perfectly. And then final thing to what Dina was saying, you need to help people bring confidence across the board. These famous corporate titans, all these people, every one of them failed. That's the common theme. Everybody fails. I've failed. Dina's failed. We all fail. So the question is, how do you help someone dust themselves off and get back on and learn from the failure? How do you help someone take the risk? And that's what true mentorship is. And we're talking about something that's really about something bigger than their career. It's about the kind of life that they seek to lead.
Debbie or Eric, anything you want to say or ask?
I think that Dina and David have really said it very well. But you do have to, a mentor has to be willing to give really honest feedback and help people keep going and looking forward. And I do think Dina's right, especially I'm a different generation than Dina, and the younger generation is even better. But for women, we've had to really fight hard to get to where we are. And it does take people mentoring you. And we're grateful. Eric's story, there's so many of us that have people like that in our lives, and none of us would be where we are had we not had those kinds of angels.
Eric, anything you want to say or ask?
No, sometimes we seek them out, and sometimes they discover us. And life is just filled with a lot of incidents, accidents, and providence. And the best of mentors are people that are with you for the rest of your life. They're checking in and making sure that you're being true to your North Star. And
Eric, would you tell Walter's story? Because he's in the book. Walter
Isaacson, who I really got to know through Dina when I worked for Dina at the State Department. When Dina left the White House, she knew that I wanted to grow and take on more responsibility. So she invited me to come and work with her at the State Department and gave me this incredible portfolio. And we were working on a lot of very important international initiatives. And she asked Walter Isaacson, the biographer and former head of Time magazine, if he would work with us. And who would have known, years later, I would have found myself working for Walter Isaacson at the Aspen Institute. And he moved me 2 doors down, and he knew that I wanted to write. He constantly encouraged me to write my own story for the sake of the people in my town. And he constantly introduced me to other people. And Walter is a very studious type of guy, as you know, but he was so concerned about my own growth and my own exposure to people who were thinking big ideas. And he never allowed an opportunity to pass without allowing me to also share in the learning. And he would bring by his manuscripts for Leonardo da Vinci, for Steve Jobs, just to engage me in conversation. There was little that I could add to the brilliance of Walter, but he wanted to empower me so that I could appreciate that it was a two-way street.
And if I could add on to that, Mark, that Walter's in the book, and there's a chapter about him, and he talks about Uncle Walker, who was the uncle of a good friend of his when he was growing up in rural Louisiana. And he'd take him fishing, and Uncle Walker seemed to have a career where he was a doctor, but he was also a writer, and he was encouraging to Walter. Well, it turned out it was Walker Percy, who won the National Book Award and the Pulitzer Prize, and was an incredible literary figure. And this was what inspired Walter to become Walter. And he tried to hand it fiction. He worked on a ferry, a Mississippi tug a riverboat one summer. Was going to write the great American novel, and he started to move into news, and obviously became, I think, probably indisputably the greatest biographer of our generation. Uncle Walker. Uncle
Yep.
Walker made the difference.
Amazing story. Thank you. Thank you, Patty. My friend Ray from Ohio, who's a journalist and who has sent me some great emails since he learned about your book about mentoring. So Ray, I turn it over to you for a question or comment to the group.
I have one of each. The question is, how do you see the link between mentoring and support? And I will go ahead and try to tell this story in the Cliff Notes version. My first job as a journalist was in Bonita, Oklahoma in 1981. And my first day there, I walked into a barber shop and the guy said, "We don't cut hair here." And then I walked into a restaurant and the guy said, "I'm sorry, we're out of watermelon." And I went and I relayed this to John Turner, the publisher of the Bonita Daily Journal, who got on the phone. He called the guy at the barbershop. He called the owner of the restaurant. Within 20 minutes, they were at my desk apologizing. Then he looks at me and he goes, "Do you have a suit?" "I don't have a suit." He goes, "Go down the street, get yourself a suit because you're going to the country club with me tonight." I go to the country club with him. And as dinner's being served, he stands up and he says to the entire room, "This is Ray Marcano, and he is my new news editor," which told everybody, don't screw with this guy. So
Wow.
his support was equally as important to me as the mentoring. And I wonder if you see that strong connection between the two.
Dina and
Wow.
Dave.
That's so powerful, Ray. And it's so interesting how there are stories in the book very similar. You know, Sarah Huckabee Sanders is in the book, and she talks about two mentors she had in her life. Obviously, her dad played a pretty big role in instilling confidence in her. And President Trump, I mean, she had a really tough job. The job of the White House press secretary is pretty brutal. And she was pretty down one day. She was being attacked personally on her looks, on a number of things. And he took her aside and he said, "I think you're one of the best people on my team. I have complete confidence in you. I'm going to say that when we walk out. And the only thing that you have to do is never let them see you sweat." And just that kind of moment, made such a difference to her. And we have a story in the book about Condi Rice, young Condi Rice, a Soviet specialist traveling with Brent Scrowcroft to a summit where it's their first meeting with Gorbachev. And he says to him, "Hey, Gorbachev, this is President George H.W. Bush. This is the person that tells me everything I need to know about the Soviet Union." And in Russian, he says, "Well, what the heck would she ever know about the Soviet Union?" And he didn't realize that Condi Rice spoke Russian. And so she understood it. But the point of that was everyone knew not to mess with Condi after that, as they were negotiating the end of the Cold War. So sometimes it's what you do to support people, Ray, that's in one moment, that's a mentorship of a lifetime in many ways.
David McCormick, Senator McCormick, before we leave you, do you want to say something? I know you need to go, so I'll give you some.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to jump off. Thank you so much for doing this. You've got such a great group here of people. I see all the new folks that just came on. I would just ask your listeners or viewers here to ask themselves 3 questions. If they did that, we would think we're a big success. One is, who believed in you? Who believed in you? Think about it. Take a minute to reflect. 2, have you told them thank you? As Dina said, many of the people we talked to said, "Oh, I wish I would have told them how important they were." And 3, what are you doing to pass it forward or play it forward? What are you doing to pass it along, to do your part to help others find their purpose? If the great people on this call ask themselves those questions, I think it'd be a great success. So thanks for having us, Mark. And sorry I got to run.
All right, Senator, thank you again. Who believed in you? We appreciate you joining. We hope you'll come back regularly, Senator. Thank you. All right, joining us now, 3 more people connected to the McCormicks in the book. Brad Todd, Jason Miller, John Ellis. I would say, using one of my favorite jokes, this is the most political talent and wisdom gathered in one place, with the possible exception of when Hogan Gidley dined alone. So very grateful to have the 3 of you here. Jason, of course, has long worked with President Trump and a bunch of other campaigns. Brad Todd has won 1 million races, including helped Dave McCormick win. And John Ellis, amongst other things, writes probably the most popular Substack in the world. A bunch of my readers are his readers, and they always say John's is invaluable, which means mine is not. So grateful to all of you for joining. Jason, start with you. Busy day for you, I know, because you're helping the president and the administration with a bunch of stuff, as you always do. Just tell us about your connection to both the McCormicks and the book and to mentoring, and grateful to you for making time.
No, thank you very much. And Dina and Dave, congratulations on the book. I think this is fantastic. It's an issue that's near and dear to my heart as someone who don't usually talk about this kind of stuff, but grew up in a single parent household. And so as many of us who are on this call may have been in a similar environment, money was pretty tight when I was growing up. And so when I think the first job I had was at a paper route, but I've pretty much worked continuously, I think, since 4th grade. And so when I was in, I think, was it 5th going into 6th grade, maybe 6th going into 7th grade, there was an appliance store that was on my paper route that I used to go in there and kind of shoot the bull with the guys, and would just start offering to do odd jobs and various things. And before he knew it, Kevin Flaherty was the manager of the store. I mean, I'll never forget him. He's like, you know what? You do such a great job. I'm just going to pay out of my own pocket. So every day when you finish up your paper out as an afternoon paper, then why don't you come in and work for 2 or 3 hours, and I'll just pay out of my own pocket. Pretty sure I'm violating some child labor law. Because that's fine. He's like, you're a good kid. I think about one of my, but he was someone who, you know, at a time in my life when that little extra money made it a big deal. And yes, don't worry, he paid me more than what minimum wage would be. Even though I offered to say, you can just pay me minimum wage. He goes, no, at least if I'm going to get in trouble, I may as well like overpay you here. But you know, people who've taken a chance and said, or in some cases of my life, here's a second or third chance. You know, but had various mentors along the way. I think back to one of my basketball coaches, Reverend David Anthony Barton, preacher, teacher, brother, and friend, who looked and saw a diamond in the rough. Unfortunately, the D1 college coaches didn't quite see the same diamond in the rough, but at the high school AAU level, he definitely did. That's how the opportunity for me to even come back to the East Coast when I grew up in Seattle, play basketball in DC and Philly and New York. That's where really that dream even came from, was Coach Dave took a chance and put me on the team and said, I'm going to help show you the world. And I think that really opened up my eyes for opportunities and things that I went on to do. And I even say that professionally, I think this is one of the things to keep in mind, that the mentor and mentorship dynamic, it never stops. I mean, there are people even now, I don't have much time left in my 40s, about another like week and a half. But there are even people to this day that I continue to learn from, whether it be going into the phase of my career where I focus a lot more on business, and people who've kind of taken me under their wing and said, I'm going to teach you much more about, say, international economy or international trade or things of that nature. And even in politics, I've been pretty fortunate and successful in working with someone who's a pretty damn good campaigner, so it made things a lot easier. But there are people that I learn from every single day. And again, you never know where those opportunities are going to come from. I've done my best to try to get back on that, but I'll always feel that I've probably learned more than I've been able to teach. Maybe at some point in another phase in life, I'll be able to help out. But you know, I'll never forget going back to Kevin Flaherty at Jack Roberts Appliance Store in Linwood, Washington, who at a critical time in my life really gave me an opportunity to work hard, learn the aspect, and quite frankly, that's I think where part of the sales came from, because that's what they did. They sold TVs, they sold appliances. And this guy literally just said, you know, here's how you sell. And I'll quit rambling here, but even I think to one of my first managers, believe it or not, I sold women's shoes at Nordstrom when I was in high school. So I graduated from the appliance store to selling women's shoes. And Ron Trusello, who was my manager there, who taught me show for, sell more. And he's like, look, I'm going to turn you into a salesman, kid. You know, I ended up doing slightly cooler version of sales as life continued. But you always think back to those people who gave you the chance, who said, you know what, this doesn't necessarily directly benefit me, but I want to take a chance on you. I'm going to help give back. And I think that's really what Dina and Dave's book speaks to, are the people who recognize that value in someone, they took that chance on them.
Jason,
That's
is
beautiful.
Go ahead.
Beautiful.
Jason
That,
is very, sorry, go ahead, Dina, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that's really beautiful, Jason. Thank you, and thank you for joining us. Jason's a
Jason,
great mentor. He doesn't talk about it, but I know
yeah,
of some people whose lives he's changed.
and he is wise beyond his years. And he also, there are three people on here who, if I need someone to text with at 4 a.m., I can reliably count on him. And Jason is one of them. I won't identify the other two, but Jason, thank you for joining. And as you
more,
correctly,
Mark, that's more from I think the sleep apnea as opposed to
understood.
my responsive. But take where you get it.
You're up morning, and Jason suggested at the beginning of his remarks, you don't often hear Jason talk about things like that. So really honored that you'd share all that with us. I tried to unmute John Ellis, but I failed so far. So I'm going to go to Brad. Brad, welcome in again. You're a Republican consultant, and that's a business that sometimes is compared to sharks, but it offends the sharks. So explain how in your business you've been both mentored and mentored others.
Well, for sure. It is insulting to the Sharks if you to lump us in with them. And we always love to see those approval ratings of Congress where they are, because it gives us hope. Maybe we can get to that point as a profession. One of my mentors is often on this call. I don't think I see him tonight, but Alex Castellanos. I came to Washington back in 1999 in the early internet era, as I like to say, and to be an apprentice under Alex. And he's been a mentor forever, and really
good one to have.
Taught me the craft. A couple other mentors I want to hit real quick. Number one is my grandfather, and rather than give you the story, this in tonight's time, I've just dropped in the chat an op-ed I wrote about his mentorship last year for Father's Day in the Washington Post. So you can read that on your own time. He was a simple factory worker and with an 8th grade education who had big dreams for me. And was willing to sacrifice for it. And so I owe a lot to him. But the mentor I'd like to talk about tonight is my college advisor. I went to Rhodes College in Memphis, Tennessee. And the political science professor I had as a freshman was a brand new guy there. They wouldn't even let him take advisees. But as soon as they did, I signed up to be one of his advisees. We hit it off, and I thought it'd be great because he wouldn't have many. And maybe I'd get more attention. That was maybe one of the most fateful decisions I've ever made in my life. Before you knew it, I was at his house on Sunday night. I was babysitting his kids, and I was house sitting for him in the summer. And my dad thought that was great. He thought that was all worth the private school tuition to have that relationship in college. But that was a fraction of the mentorship. And one thing Dina said earlier I wanted to touch on is that mentorship has to have longevity. In 1999, he came to my wedding. My wife was really surprised. He really couldn't afford it. We did one of those silly destination weddings at a beach. He flew in. He stayed at a motel 30 miles away. He went to the ceremony and the reception, and then he quickly got back home. And she thought that was weird. And I said, "Oh, I'll know him my whole life." And I really didn't know if I believed it at the time. But it's true. I have known him my whole life, and I talk to him almost every week or email him almost every week. And one thing he's taught me about mentorship is he's never stopped teaching me or challenging me. And many times he challenges me when he agrees with me, and he challenges me anyway because he wants to push my own thinking. And even though he thinks I'm correct in the first place, I think he reads everything I write. He watches most of my segments on CNN. And he's never shy about holding me accountable for something when he thinks I didn't quite do it right or didn't have it right. And he sends me reading material that he thinks offers new thought. We during COVID, we started doing Zoom cocktails with each other, just as if we would if we're sitting next to each other in a bar. And I learned he's a constitutional scholar and a political philosophy professor. Political philosophy is his real strength, and I really like political philosophy and think that we need to pin our actions in politics to an ideological goal or aim. And so I find it it's adjacent to what I do for a living, but it really makes me think a lot more in what I do for a living. But it also just makes me feel better as a person to be pushed and to be challenged, and by someone who, if you have unconditional love, there's no challenge that's too much. And I think that commitment to challenge and that commitment to love unconditionally and to stay with it. He's been mentoring me now for 30 something years. And so, it's half of his life. And it's, I took my daughter there this year. She's looking for colleges, and he wanted to sit and have a cocktail with us and talk to her. And I watched him engage her in things that she cared about that not even I cared about. And I watched her open up intellectually right there before my very eyes. And I think that sort of that sense of how do you challenge someone's intellect is a real gift and a real part of mentoring. And I saw him do it to somebody else. And so I kind of could see what had happened with me. So that's where I wanted to throw out.
Brad, amongst the many things I loved about what you said, and it's similar to my reaction to Jason, is I've never heard you talk about stuff with this tone and this way, and it's testament to how important the topic is that you talked about it in a way that, you know, people watching on cable news haven't heard you talk that way. So, Dean, I'll turn it to you for a comment or question for Brad, and then bring John Ellison.
Well, because Brad was in the trenches with us, I heard a lot of emotion from Brad Todd over the campaign, sometimes directed at me. So, no, Brad is also one of those people. You know, you have the longevity of a mentor, and we've all talked about that one or, you know, two people. There is also kind of just friends that you get a gut check on, mainly because you know they're going to tell you the truth when you already know the answer. And Brad actually has been that for me. So we feel so fortunate to have him in our lives and count him as such a good friend. He's one of the good guys.
John Ellis, I won't say he's the wisest person on the call, but I'll say there's nobody wiser. John, welcome in. Tell us again your connection to Dave and Dina and to the book and to the topic.
Well, Dina worked for my cousin, which is when I first heard of her. And then we connected via the internet, actually, when David was first running for the United States Senate.
Your cousin who happened to be the president.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, just putting the context in there.
Yeah, George W. Bush, not George H.W. Bush. So I met them basically, you know, in text messaging and on the internet. And then as I was starting up the newsletter, they were very helpful in getting it off the ground. So I'm hugely appreciative of everything they've done for me. On the mentoring front, I was very lucky. I went to the NBC News election unit back in the day when there was such a thing, and worked for a man named Roy Wetzel. And the anchorman at the time, or one of the co-anchors at the time, was a man named John Chancellor, who was one of the legendary figures in broadcast news. And for whatever reason, I was sort of adopted by John Chancellor to the point where I was his researcher for the conventions and on election night, and it made a huge difference in my career and in my appreciation for what constituted good reporting and what did not. I'm now 72 years old, and we are living in a completely different time, and a time that I think has generated more anxiety than anything I've seen in my lifetime, not because of politics, but because of what artificial intelligence, foretells for my daughter and my son and all of the daughters and sons that are out there. So from being a mentor point of view, people come to me, ask for, an internship or whatever, and almost invariably the conversation turns to what is AI going to do to my future? And I think, and I'm reading a lot about it as I go along, and I'm not quite sure I know what the answers are, but I think if you're going to be a mentor in this time, you have to really address the implications of artificial intelligence.
Yep. Right.
Hey, Mark, I have a quick thing, because there's a connection between John and Brad Todd, which is I would get notes from John, 2 campaigns. Dave says, I've tried losing and I've tried winning. And he said, winning's a little more fun. but John stuck with us and would send notes. And, I saw this or I saw that. You were the first person to say that the wrestling ad that Brad Todd and On Message did, which was Dave's very first ad about him wrestling through high school gyms in Pennsylvania, and why that, was a reason to believe that he had some strength and could fight for you. And that ad just won campaign ad of the year. And I'll be honest, I'm a woman. I guess I didn't totally get it. But you, John, said, this is the best ad I've seen. And Brad.
It became my nickname for your husband. It was the wrestler. How's the wrestler doing today?
That's right. That's right.
Liz, welcome in. John, thank you. Please stay with us. Liz, welcome in. Tell folks who don't know where you are, what's on your mind, and any question you have about who believed in you or the topic of mentoring.
My name's Liz. I'm from Southeastern Pennsylvania. So this conversation is like, it's so uplifting. And I don't usually read the chat, but it is nothing but positivity. This is such a blessing. And I'm a little bit like, I'm tingling right now. But one thing, the AI thing, I think it really just struck me, John, when you said that, because this has to be the realm that AI can never touch, because mentoring is human connection. And I guess one thing with the young people and so many people working from home, I'm just hopeful that books like this and conversations like this will encourage people to be really intentional, because it takes work and commitment to be a mentor. And just to answer those 3 questions that your husband or asked us to contemplate on our way out, Dina. Martha Verrill Schlager was my mentor when I was a young working person in DC, and she threw me into the deep end all the time. And it was such a confidence builder, really. And I just wrote to her this year after about 15 years of being out of touch to say thank you.
Wow.
And the third one, am I paying it forward? You know, for those of us who have been sort of out of the working world for a while, for one reason or another, this is convicting, because there are ways that we can mentor and encourage people too. So I just thank you so much. This is like the total package for two-way. Mark, thank you for this great discussion, and to everybody, these stories are like blowing my mind. I'm gonna buy all the books tonight.
All right, Liz, thank you.
Thank you, Liz.
Dina, and we haven't heard from Debbie in a bit. So Dina and Debbie, thoughts about what Liz said.
Well, Liz, I don't know if you were on from the beginning. It's literally why we wrote the book, because of the 3 years of losing human connectivity. You really can't, give feedback over Zoom. It's really hard to do. You can't shadow somebody over Zoom or take somebody aside when they're hurt and say, it's going to be okay. And so I think I worry a little too, to be honest, that what we lost from, COVID keeping us away from each other might be happening a little bit with AI. And I really hope that we don't lose the fact that it is people to people. It's actually being with each other. It's actually caring for each other, and being vulnerable. And you just can't be vulnerable on a screen or with ChatGPT. And so I'm so convicted that you said that. I'm so honored that this is speaking to you. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Debbie.
Well, I'm just going to say that relationships matter. And that's one of the things that's the most, I think one of the most challenging things in government and politics these days, because people don't get to know each other. If you trust somebody, you can disagree with somebody, but if you trust that person, you can work things out. I think AI is very dangerous. I know it's an answer for many things, but relationships and talking to people, I constantly say to the kids that work for me, call somebody. And to them, that's texting. Have a conversation. Talk to them. That's one of the things I mentor everybody on. Conversations, real talk, getting to know people, getting to trust people really matters.
Mark, welcome in. Thank you for joining. Tell us where you are for folks who don't know and what's on your mind.
We're kind of wrapping it up now. I'll make this quick. 3rd time on the show. I'm in Central Texas, veteran and licensed psychotherapist working for the VA. I did finally answer that Doge 5 things. So I did finally do it as an update. My mentor, Jack Lang, psychologist, Vietnam veteran. After I retired in 2014, I decided I wanted to pivot to mental health psychology. He was one of my undergrad professors in my psychology program, turned out to be a great friend who I connected with. He helped me along the way in my master's program, and then as an unofficial supervisor for my license. And he was a great friend. He gave me all types of insights on the business side of psychology. And as a veteran, a fellow veteran, he was the best. And everything culminated last year when he passed away from cancer. And I was invited to his funeral, and it was total catharsis. And it was one of the greatest friendships I've ever had.
Mark, thank you for that. Thank you.
I don't have any questions. That's just my.
Okay, Mark, thank you. I'll get Eric in to comment on that, because I could see in his soulful eyes all the thoughts, at least some of the ideas. So Eric, go ahead.
Thank you, Mark. I thought Brett Todd also expressed those same sentiments. I mean, the very idea that his mentor was sitting with his daughter. He would have never imagined, and the influence that his mentor not only had on his life, but on his daughter's life. It's one of the great gifts. And teachers leave their impressions on us like unsigned manuscripts. And if we're fortunate, we pass it on.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I've opened up the conversation. Jason, if you want to tell us everything that's in the tariff plan, John and I would appreciate it. But I know that if you can fit that into mentorship, that'd be good. But I'll just open it up to the group as we have final moments. Anybody wants to make a final comment or final statement before Dina finishes us off? Anybody want to say anything else? Okay.
I will, Mark.
Yeah, go ahead.
I made a list of all the people that have had some influence on me and that are still with us. And I spent last year writing notes to them. And many of them I had not communicated with in years, but I wanted to make sure that while they were still alive, they actually knew the influence and the impact they had on my life. And I would just encourage everyone here who has a mentor or someone who's played some significant role in their life to make sure that you convey that gratitude to them.
Very important. Very important. Want to thank everybody who asked questions, including Ray and Mark and Liz, and thank Eric and John and Brad and Jason, Congresswoman Dingell, and of course, Senator McCormick, who had to go. Dina, again, the book's available now. Who Believed in You? We'd love for you to just close us out. You can go to the website, you can go to Amazon, you can go to the publisher. And again, the publisher link is in the chat. But Dina, I'd love for you to just close this out, and then I'll do a little bit of housekeeping after you finish.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm so inspired. This was really Dave and I's first engagement like this with the book. Thank you all so much for believing in us. Mark, thank you for believing in a lot of people. And that really means so much, and it makes a difference. Mark, from Texas, I'm a Texan too, but thank you for your service. Thank you so much. The book talks about how many selfless veterans just take it upon themselves to mentor others, especially those with PTSD and other things. So thank you so much. And I see Jason is trying to hide from the tariff question, like running out the clock. You can tell though he is in the White House. I know that room. It's called the Roosevelt Room. So we should really, speaking of wrestling, pin him down and get some information. But seriously, thank you all so much for participating. It really means a great deal. And whobelievedinu.com. We really hope it speaks to you as well.
Everybody go buy books, please. And obviously we got Mother's Day, Father's Day coming up. Great book for those holidays as well. So Dina, thank you for bringing the book to us and for being part of such a great conversation. Again, thanks to everybody here who participated. Very grateful to you. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern time, morning meeting. Dan, Sean, and I will be here to talk about the election results and the latest on tariffs and everything else going on. And then 5 o'clock Eastern time, my friend and two-way colleague, Megan McCain, will be on Megan McCain's Happy Hour here on Two-Way. She's got the authors of the new election book, Amy Parnes and Jonathan Allen, our guests to talk about their new book, focusing on both the Biden campaign and the Trump campaign. Jason Miller's probably all over that, would be my guess. I haven't read it yet. And then at 6 o'clock tomorrow night, I will be back here for this program. And again, we'll have all the latest, including President Trump's tariff announcement event. Most of the details are close hold, although a few things are coming out from briefings on the Hill and elsewhere. So we'll know a fair amount, but some of the details will wait till that event. I plan to cover that event at the White House. And so I'll be posting the program depending on how late they start and how long it goes. Maybe I'll ask Jason if he can get me into the Roosevelt Room so I can have some decent Wi-Fi to host the show, or otherwise I'll be doing it from my laptop sitting in the briefing room. So I'll see you tomorrow night at 6. And then again, please stay with us. In just a moment, we're going to convert over and we're going to talk about today, for the first time, two-way community member being allowed to ask a question through my voice, Katie from Wisconsin, and Katie's here. And so we're going to talk to Katie about how that went for her. And as I said, grateful to everybody who believed in you. On sale now. Dina, thank you. Grateful to you.
Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you again, Jason and Mark and Liz and Eric and Debbie and everybody else. Have a great evening of those of you who are leaving, but please stay with us. In just a moment, we'll move on to our final segment where we talk about two-way in the briefing room.